Today we're going to be looking at how you can take a short melody and then harmonize it with 3 different techniques. We're also going to orchestrate it 3 different ways using 3 different main groups of instruments. So one will use strings, another brass will be our main instrument, and another woodwinds. And we're going to get 3 different emotions out of our orchestrations and harmonizations. All right, let's jump right in. We'll start by looking at the melody. The melody I've constructed has a very strong structure. It's very singable, but it doesn't have a lot of chromaticism to it because I don't want to lock myself into anything since we'll be trying different techniques to harmonize this. Let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we'll look at the first technique that I used to harmonize this melody. You can hear that this melody is somewhat of a blank slate. There's no particular emotion that's jumping out at us. When we're typically writing a melody, we're thinking about a certain feeling or emotion that we want to convey, but here we're starting with this blank slate. We're going to find that feeling and emotion in our harmonizations and our orchestrations. The first way that I like to look at a melody like this is to see if I can conform it to a particular scale. When I was writing this melody, I tried very hard not to think about chords or scales, but looking back at it, I can see that it does conform to a scale. So let's see what that is. I think we'd all agree that G is the base of our scale. Some sort of G chord is our 1 chord. So let's start with G. We have a G here. We next have an A. Here's an A. We have a B flat here. So that tells me this is going to be some sort of minor sound. We have a C. We have a D. We have an E natural. That's interesting. In a normal G minor scale, we would have an E flat. So that's pointing us in some sort of different direction here. And we have an F natural. So what scale do those notes make up? We have that is a G Dorian scale. All right, let's look at what chords in G Dorian we can use to support this melody. Here are our main chords in G Dorian. We have our triads and our 7th chords. Now there are other chords you can also build from the G Dorian scale that I haven't listed here. For example, this C7, which is C, E, G, and B flat, could be a C7 sus4 if you raise the 3rd, C, F, G, and B flat. But these are the main chords that I'll be using. So let's look at how I pick the chords to support the melody. In modal harmony especially, we want to establish the 1 chord. And here in the melody we have a G, a D, and another G. And all of those notes fit into our 1 chord, the G minor chord. So let's hear this first bar supported by the 1 chord. And as you might have assumed, this works perfectly. Not only do the notes of our melody fit our chord, but we've established that G minor chord, our 1 chord, right on the downbeat of the first measure. Moving on, we want to further establish that this is in G Dorian. We have a minor chord here, so this could be in some form of minor. So how do we do that? If we harmonize this note right here, we can use a chord that has that raised sixth degree, that telltale note of the Dorian mode. And we've got a G in the melody, so let's look at our chords here. We've got a G in this C major chord, and we have that raised sixth degree, the E natural. So this progression of G minor, the 1 minor, to the 4 major, the C major, is a very common progression in Dorian. It sounds like this. Another chord that we could use here would be this A minor chord, or A minor 7. This has the G in it and that all-important raised sixth degree, the E. The G minor to C major is really the sound that we hear so much in Dorian, but this would be a nice choice too. Going to the next measure, we have an F and a D in the measure, and so I would use that same sort of thinking here, where I would at first be looking for chords that contained those notes. So if we look in our chart here, we've got a D minor chord which has the D and the F in it, or the B flat major chord with the D and F. And as I moved forward through this melody, I used the same technique to harmonize it, ending on our 1 chord. Now let's take a listen to the chords that I did choose to harmonize the melody, and also the orchestration, and how they work hand in hand to add emotion to this melody. To me, this version of our melody has a very poignant feel, and that has to do with choosing the Dorian mode and the tempo, the use of strings, and it also informed some of my chord choices. So, for example, we talked here about this could be either a C major or A minor 7 chord. Either would work really well here, and I chose the A minor 7 chord, and I thought that that had more of that poignant feel. So the feeling that you're after really has a lot to do with the chords that you're choosing, even when you're writing something modal like this. All right, now let's go and look at another way to approach this melody, and we're going to harmonize it with a whole different way of thinking. For this harmonization, we're going to be working in the key of G major and borrowing chords from the parallel minor, the G natural minor, or G Aeolian. When we were working in G Dorian, we said that that scale was very related to our G natural minor. The only difference was the raised sixth degree. So here we have that lowered sixth degree, the E flat instead of the E natural. So this E flat major 7 chord is something that's going to be very unique to this harmonization as opposed to the last one. A lot of these chords are also going to be very similar to our last harmonization, but they'll all be heard in the context of G major. So let's look at some of the ways that I harmonized this. I started on our 1 chord again, which now is G major instead of G minor. Originally, we had this for our Dorian harmonization of the first bar. Very pretty, and not really heroic. That's what I'm going for in this harmonization, something very upbeat and heroic. So if we hear this opening bar against just G major, such a different sound. So you can see how this is going to fit into this kind of heroic idea. And I'll be taking this and orchestrating it into the brass as kind of a, fanfare type of thing. All right, so the next two chords, I decided it would be interesting to keep the same sound that we had in Dorian using the same chords, but now we're hearing them against a G major harmony instead of G minor. So it sounds very different. I'm just going to play it slowly for you. So we have this. And then I decided to use the same chord for the next measure, which is B flat. And then for measure 3, again, the same chord that we used in Dorian, the C major. And then for bar 4, I really wanted to get that special chord that we don't have available in the last harmonization, which was the E flat on bar 4 we have. And then back to F. And then just back to G major. So you can see that even though I use the same chords in bar 2 and 3, they sound so different in the context of G major. All right, let's take a listen to the harmonization and the orchestration of our melody now with these G major chords and the borrowed chords from the parallel minor. Wow, that is so different from the last version we did, where we harmonized it and orchestrated it in this very poignant way. Here, we've orchestrated and harmonized it in this very exciting and heroic way. So it shows you our blank slate melody that we started with can be used in all sorts of different ways depending on how we handle it. So now we're going to look at one more harmonization technique, and this one is really unusual. It's something that I've done from the very beginning of my composing journey. I don't really exactly know what to call it, but you can get some very, very interesting results from it. So let's take a look. For the final harmonization technique we're going to look at today, I've put up the full orchestration featuring woodwinds, and I've decided to call this either free harmonization or chord tone harmonization. Let's look at how this works. The idea behind it is that you start with your melody note and then pick a chord where the melody note is a chord tone, and then you freely pick any chord that fits. So for example, here I have a G as my melody note, and I've decided to pick an A flat minor major 7 over G for that chord. So that sounds like this. There's my chord. And this G is the major 7 of that chord. And the reason I decided to pick this chord over all of the many, many chords that I could have picked for this note is that it had the mysterious sound that I wanted. Moving farther on here, you can see that now I have a D flat 9 flat 5. And now this F is the third of the chord. I do like to pick a note that is either the root, third, fifth, or seventh, one of the more prominent notes in a chord. So for this melody note, the F, I've chosen a D flat 9 flat 5. And the reason I picked this chord is because, again, it had that mysterious sound that I'm after. And the F now is the third of the chord. Moving on, you can see that here for this G7 flat 13 sharp 11, I have a D as the fifth of the chord, and this is a very complex chord, but the D is one of those lower chord tones. It's the fifth, so I think that works very nicely. Here on the C9 flat 5, I've got the third of the chord and the root of the chord. So I've continued on picking chords in that manner. And you can see that I have other minor major 7 chords, just like the first chord here. That's kind of the sound of this piece. If we go to the last chord, we've got another chord that's kind of interesting here. And this is a polychord. It's a G triad over a B triad. I've got a D in the melody, so that would be the 5th of the G chord, this note right here. So here's our G chord. And underneath that, we have a B major chord. And if you put them together, you get this sound with the D as our melody note. So that's how all of these chords came to be. Let's take a listen to this, and then we'll come back and talk about it a little more. As you can hear, this version is radically different from the first two, and that's because we changed our way of thinking about how to harmonize this melody. Also, the orchestration with the woodwinds taking the lead, the celeste doubling the melody, this bisbigliando tremolo-like figure in the harp with the delay and the reverb effects pedals, they all come together to create this mysterious mood. I hope you'll try some of these harmonization techniques on your own pieces, especially this last one. It can lead to some very interesting results. Let's listen to all 3 of these versions back to back. We'll start with what we called our blank slate piano melody. So now, harmonize a melody 3 ways. I'll see you all next time.